The air hung heavy, thick with the memory of his visit. My skin still crawled, prickling with phantom touches. The warden. He had been here just an hour ago, his presence lingering like a foul odor. His words echoed in the silence of the house, a constant reminder of my confinement. Every creak of the floorboards sent shivers down my spine, expecting his sudden appearance. I dared not move from my spot on the couch. My gaze remained fixed on the front door, the only entry and exit to my prison. It was a flimsy barrier between me and him, offering little comfort. The flimsy lock, a joke. He could come and go as he pleased. I was trapped. My thoughts raced, replaying his every word, every gesture. The way his eyes, usually a dull grey, had flickered with an unsettling light. A warning. I had angered him. My punishment would be swift, and it would be unbearable. He had arrived without warning, as usual, materializing in my living room like a phantom. His presence was always unsettling. Today, it was suffocating. The air crackled with a strange energy, a palpable tension. His eyes were different this time. Gone was the usual dull grey, replaced by a vibrant, almost glowing green. "You disobeyed," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. I dared not speak. My throat constricted, fear a living thing within me. His gaze bore into me, searing my skin. I could feel his anger, a physical presence in the room. "You know the rules," he continued, each word a hammer blow against my skull. "There are consequences." He stepped closer, the green in his eyes intensifying, burning like embers. I flinched, unable to meet his gaze. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. I was trapped, a fly caught in a spider's web. The punishment was always swift, always cruel. This time was no different. "Make a sandwich," he commanded, his voice cold, sharp. A simple enough task, one would think, but not for me, not anymore. Not with the world plunged into darkness. He had taken my sight. A temporary blindness, he had called it. Temporary torture was more accurate. I fumbled in the darkness, my hands shaking, fear making my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. The familiar layout of my kitchen, now a labyrinth of unseen obstacles. The scent of bread, usually comforting, now mocked me with its proximity. My fingers brushed against the cold, hard surface of the counter. A small victory. I inched forward, searching for the bread knife. Each movement felt amplified, the sounds of my own breathing echoing in the silence. He watched my every move, his silence more unnerving than any words. I could feel his eyes on me, burning into my skin. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Each fumble, each stumble fueled his amusement. This was a game to him, a cruel, twisted game where I was the only player. My fingers finally grasped the bread knife, the metal cold and unforgiving against my skin. I sliced the bread, my movements jerky, uneven. The sound of the knife tearing through the loaf was deafening in the silence. I fumbled with the cheese, the lettuce, the cold cuts, each ingredient a small victory, a testament to my growing frustration and despair. The sandwich, when finally assembled, was a lopsided, messy affair, but it was done. Work. A sanctuary, a brief respite from the suffocating reality of my confinement. The office, with its mundane tasks and familiar faces, offered a semblance of normalcy. The outside world, though just beyond the windows, felt a million miles away. For 8 hours a day I could pretend to be normal, pretend to have a life outside the four walls of my prison. My co-workers, oblivious to my tormentor, chatted about their families, their weekends, their lives. Their normalcy was a painful reminder of all that I had lost, but it was a welcome distraction. A chance to forget for a little while the ever-present dread that clung to me like a shroud, the fear that followed me home each night, waiting for me behind the front door. The pressure was always building, a constant tension that tightened its grip with each passing day. It manifested in different ways, a throbbing headache, a knot in my stomach, a persistent tremor in my hands. The rules were endless, ever-changing, designed to keep me off balance. One day it was the silence. I was forbidden to make any noise. The next it was the constant talking. I had to fill the silence with words, any words, no matter how nonsensical. The phone was forbidden, visitors non-existent. The internet, my only connection to the outside world, was heavily monitored. Every keystroke, every click scrutinized. The silence was the worst, the suffocating, oppressive silence that hung heavy in the air. broken only by the sound of my own breathing. It was during these times that the fear was most potent, feeding on my isolation, amplifying every creak and groan of the old house. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. Time lost all meaning. My only companions were the shadows that danced across the walls, shifting shapes that mirrored my growing paranoia. The silence was his weapon, a tool to break my spirit, to erode my sanity. And it was working. I could feel myself slipping, the edges of my mind fraying. I was losing my grip on reality, teetering on the precipice of madness. The park across the street was a constant taunt, a rectangle of green bathed in sunlight, filled with the laughter of children and the chirping of birds. It was a world away, separated from me by an invisible barrier, a line I dared not cross. Sometimes, late at night, when the world was asleep, I would stand at my window and watch the park. The emptiness was comforting. A brief reprieve from the constant scrutiny. I would imagine myself walking among the trees, feeling the soft grass beneath my feet, the sun warm on my skin. These moments were fleeting, stolen moments of peace that I clung to desperately. Small acts of rebellion against the suffocating control that ruled my life. They were a reminder that there was still beauty in the world, even if it felt so far out of reach. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. The walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with their familiarity. Every corner held a memory, a reminder of my past life, the life I had before the house arrest, before the warden. Sleep offered little escape. My nights were plagued by nightmares, vivid and terrifying. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the echoes of the nightmares clinging to me like cobwebs. I was trapped, both physically and mentally. My world had shrunk to the confines of these four walls. My life, once filled with promise and possibility, was now reduced to a monotonous routine of fear and obedience. The dread was a constant companion, a shadow that followed me everywhere. I lived in a perpetual state of anticipation, waiting for his next visit, his next punishment. What new torment would he devise? What new rule would he impose? I knew I couldn't live like this forever. Something had to give. I couldn't let him break me. I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my life, my sanity. But how? How do you fight an invisible enemy? How do you escape a prison with no bars? These were the questions that haunted me, that fueled my growing desperation. The answers for now remained elusive.